Merry Christmas. My wife decided we should film this. So I guess we're going to take a break from scraping and machine work and engines. And today's topic is going to be baking. We're going to be baking panettone. For those of you who don't know what panettone is, it's an Italian holiday yeast bread, which is flavored with citrus peel and raisins, and it's very good. The commercially available panettone leaves much to be desired, so we make our own. And part of that is making the candied citrus peel, which is not a secret, but it's a special process. So we start with oranges, and we peel them as much as possible into segments, strips, because some of these strips will become candy. They will be, well, maybe you'll see that, but they'll be cut about 3/8 of an inch wide from top to bottom, about 3 inches long, candied, and then dipped in dark chocolate. The remaining pieces that don't survive that process will be chopped into smaller bits and used in the making of the panettone. When my wife first met me, we're just going to score the skin here. One of the things she noticed about me was my fingernails. Now, most of my fingernails are fairly neat, but some of them are rather long. And she thought I was a fat, unkempt old man. Little did she know that my fingernails are one of my very important tools, not the least of which is for peeling orange peel to make panettone. Still think I'm a fat, unkempt old man?
Yes, I do. But you're my fat, unkempt old man.
There you go. So if that doesn't count as incidental information, it is a strip that's
just about perfect.
Just about ready to become a piece of candy. Now the next thing we have to do, I have a whole bag of these oranges to peel. The next thing we're about to do is we have to fillet the white pith off of the inside of the peel. And we do that with a very sharp knife on a cutting board, much the way you see them separate the fillet of fish from the bones, just on a smaller scale. So I'm going to peel the rest of these oranges, and we'll get back to you later with the next steps. That's how I gauge the cut. I'm just going to do voiceover on all this when I do the editing.
Yep.
Sometimes it goes in and out of focus depending on how close you move your hand to the camera.
Mm-hmm. Try one more. That's really what we're after. Okay. And for candy, those are nice strips for candy. Okay, that should be enough. It's 3 o'clock. I've been at this since about 9:30. This was 8 pounds of oranges. This takes quite a while. That's my bucket of pith that we've cut off the back of all this peel. And the nice pieces that are nice thickness and color, even color, we don't want any green spots or any of that. This will be cooked for the candy, for the chocolate dip orange candy. And if we need to chop more of this for the panettone, we can always chop it up. But I can't put it back together. So we probably have a majority of the orange peel has been cut for candy, because I never seem to have enough of it. Everybody likes it. Wish you could smell what I'm smelling here now. This is the edges that are a little bit thinner, and maybe they got a little, not quite a nicer color. And this has been chopped up. This will become the candy for the baking, the candied peel. But before we can candy this, we have to remove some of the bitterness that's still in the little bit of white pith that remains. So we're going to boil this very, very slowly. Just bring it to a boil. Pour the water off. Add fresh cold water. Bring it to a boil again. And pour it off again. We're going to do this 3 times. I've tried shortening it. I've tried doing it less. I've tried doing it more. But 3 times is what seems to be required. How Christmassy. Alright, let's talk about what's going on here. We're boiling, well, we're going to be boiling shortly. We're going to be boiling to get the bitterness out of this. And then we're going to be cooking it in simple syrup. And that's a very, very slow process. And you would think that the boiling would remove these volatile oils, and volatile in a lot of ways. Let me just show you here. Very flammable oil that's oh, there we go, that's in these orange peels. And you would think that in the boiling that these aromatic oils would be vaporized and lost, because if you buy this orange peel from the store, it invariably has just no flavor. Well, it turns out that they tend to steam the volatiles out of the citrus peel that you buy in the store, commercially made. So you're buying what looks like orange peel and is certainly sweet, but it doesn't really taste much like orange peel. So that'll smell nice. And the situation is even worse when we go to the sugar, because the sugar we're going to be bringing up to about 215 degrees. Now, to get the sugar into the orange peel, it doesn't want to go there. If you try doing it quickly, you will cook away the water, you'll end up with syrup, but the orange peel will not have absorbed the sugar. It doesn't want to absorb the sugar. The sugar has to be forced into the orange peel. And the only way to do that is the process of cooking the sugar, bringing the sugar concentration up, has to be done very, very, very slowly. So when we get to that point, it'll probably cook overnight. Usually I do it overnight. I'll start somewhere after dinner, and I'll just let it go all night, very, very slowly, just a very extremely slow simmer with the lid on. And by the next day, hopefully somewhere around 215 degrees, we can stop. Now, we have to bring the sugar concentration up very slowly in order to force the sugar into the peel. It doesn't want to go in there. You can't do it quickly. You can raise the concentration of the syrup quickly enough, but that doesn't do anything to get the sugar into the peel. It's just a slow process. It takes lots of time and heat. Now, the sugar concentration needs to come up to about 75%. That's quite a bit more than what is normally done for like cooking maple syrup, which stops at about 68%, I believe. I have here a Brix meter. It's a optical refractometer, which reads 0 to 72% Brix. So when I just max this out, when this gets up to about 70, then I know I can stop. So we probably won't see this work until tomorrow. What's nice about this is that it's not temperature dependent. If you use a hydrometer, which actually uses the specific gravity of a column of liquid with a weighted indicator, the temperature has to be just right, because the density of the sugar syrup is greatly affected by its temperature. Obviously, warm things expand, cool things contract, and if the volume changes and the concentration doesn't, then by definition, density is mass per unit volume. If the volume changes, it's going to change the hydrometer reading. But the Brix meter is optical, and the concentration of solvent and solute, the optical properties really don't change with temperature. Plus, it only takes a drop. I don't have to have a whole column of fluid. I can just put a drop on the surface of this prism, and on this plastic piece, if you can see that, there is a diffraction grating which aligns the right light rays to enter the thin film of fluid which is between the prism and the diffraction grating, and it bends to give you an indication. So, looking through the viewfinder, we see two scales, 0 to 44 on the left and 44 to 73 on the right. This is pure water at 0. And then looking at the right-hand scale, it's about 46, which is the sugar syrup we're starting with. Okay, so we have completed 3 boilings on this peel that will be going in the panettone. We're still waiting for the 3rd boil on the candy, the citrus strips for the candy, just coming to a boil now. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make the syrup. This is just water in there, and this is that's about not quite 2 quarts of water. And we're going to add some Caro syrup. This will help to prevent crystallization when we're all done. I'm just going to add roughly about a 1/4 cup of Caro syrup. It's not a critical amount. Little invert sugar. And good old sucrose. And we're going to add quite a bit of this. So we've got about 3 cups of sugar here. So 3 cups of water rather. And we're going to add about 3 cups of sugar. Now seemingly we're adding a lot more than we need, but this volume is going to be reduced quite a bit. And once it is reduced, we still need enough syrup to cover the fruit. You notice that the submerged fruit is now floating. So that's a little lesson in specific gravity. We changed the density of the by adding sugar, we've changed the density, increased the density of the liquid. Okay, so again, we're ready to add the sugar. I think this is so neat. Here we go. This is really this is the definition of incidental information. We're gonna add sugar to water and watch the orange peel float. How much will it take? Now this will not be the case after the orange peel has absorbed the sugar. It will be denser than the syrup. And it's important we added the corn syrup to prevent crystallization, because the syrup will be what the fruit, if we don't use it right away, there it goes, it's starting to float. The syrup is what the fruit will remain in under storage. It'll be such a high concentration of sugar that it needs no refrigeration. It will keep quite well in a sealed container. And the only thing we have to worry about is crystallization, because crystallization will damage the fruit. Kind of like ice forming in certain foods. If you want nice crispy vegetables, normally you don't want to freeze them. It's been about 24 hours. It's 3:30 the next day. I probably have arrived a little sooner than that. And we're about 220 there, which is a little hot. And we're bubbling away. I'm going to turn that off. And I'm going to turn this one off. This is the pieces for the candy. You see very small bubbles. You know you're at near where you want to be when the bubbles get small. Now, this is probably a little thicker or a little more syrupy than it needs to be. I could have stopped at about 215. Would have been fine. I'm up to about 220 here. But it took very slowly. Didn't lose too much volume. Lost about an inch of water. We started off about 40, roughly 50%. And we've lost about 1/3 of our volume. So we're up at about 66 to 68%. And we checked that with the old refractometer. And this only reads to 72%. And I presume that's because after 72% at room temperature, you probably have crystallization. That's probably saturated it at no longer in solution at 72%. So there you have it. Now this is going to be used for our baking. These little pieces, and what I do is I just package them. I put them right into a container in this syrup, and I leave them in the syrup, which gets very thick. And I just rinse them off when I'm ready to use them. I rinse them off and add them to my filling or dough or whatever they're going into. These, however, will get quickly rinsed off now. I want them to retain just a little bit of sugar on their surface because we're going to lay them on cookie sheets covered with superfine sugar. There we go. Well, it's a broken one. And we're going to bring it over. Hold it up to the light. Hopefully we can focus on that. And you may or may not be able to see. It's fairly translucent. Okay. It's time to sugar the peel. That's going to be used for making the candies, the chocolate orange candies. We're going to use a lot of sugar here. And I won't go to waste because what is left over here will be used to make new syrup, probably for the lemons, which I have not yet gotten to. So these have been draining for about an hour. Most of the syrup is gone. They just have a little coating. Oh, there's a little piece. And just a little more sugar in here. That should do it. And we're going to let the sugar get between all these pieces of orange and break them apart, completely coat them. This is the best way to get them to separate. Maybe I can come over here and show you that. Just keep rolling them, and eventually they'll separate. And I have two half sheets here covered with parchment, and we're just going to take these you can take off the excess sugar if you like. Okay, so we're going to do this for a while, and let these sit for about a day or two. I'll just lay another piece of parchment over the top, put it up on top of my cupboard behind me here, where they're out of the way of little hands and mouths. Out of sight, out of mind. You know, people rarely look up. Kind of like animals too. If you walk in the woods, you rarely see an animal look up, why hunters and tree stands are. It's a successful method. But I mentioned in the previous introduction that I'm a ham radio operator, and I lived in New York City for a while. I had a 50-foot radio tower on the side of my house in a densely populated area. And after 20-some years, I moved. And when I moved, they took down my radio tower. Well, the commotion brought the neighbors out, who were astounded to see that I was putting up a radio tower that'd been there for 20 years. People don't look up. So these candies are going to go up high. I ended up with exactly 1 pint of fruit for the candy, the small bits for the candy, for the bread. And I want to cover this with syrup before I store it, because it will dry out and crystallize if I don't. The syrup that I just put back on the stove, I had to add a little water to it to rinse some of the syrup off of the candy and rinse the pots out. So I added some clean distilled water again, and I brought it down to 60%. So I want it to be at least 65 before I pour it on here. Below the 63 is getting dangerous as far as growing things. You won't get bacterial growth, but you can certainly get fungus and mold. So it's got to be 65 at a minimum. I'll probably bring it up closer to 67 or 68, which is where it was when I stopped cooking this. So just want to see, I got that's 1 pint of candied peel for baking, and whatever the weight of that is. So 8 pounds of oranges to that.